Welcome everyone to our youth forum organized by the Spring Street International School's Environmental System class with the help of the Friday Harbor Eco Club. I'm Alien Chan and my fellow environmental system classmate Ella Angevine and I would be facilitating this forum. We would like to give a special welcome and thanks to our county council candidates, Rick Hughes and Cindy Wolf from Orcas Island, and Ryan Palmstier and Christine Minnie from San Juan Island.
We'll be covering the following issues: climate change, waste reduction, affordable housing, whale and salmon habitats, tourism, and the economy. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer the questions, and we will give you a 1-minute warning, followed by a 30-second warning. I'm sorry, that's backwards for me, but our first question goes to Ryan, and we have environmental systems student Linnea Morris asking about waste reduction. If you would like Linnea to repeat any of the questions, please ask and it will not be taken from your answer time. Linnea?
What will you do if you are elected to reduce the amount of waste we send to landfills and educate the community?
Thank you so much. It's a really important question. It's something I've been working towards for 3 years now, looking into ways of how can we take the waste that we have here and reduce the overall cost while handling it here on island. One of the big pieces here, there's really 2 large chunks that we could look at. One is biogasification of woody biomass, but then also biodigestion of food scraps. The big piece here is that we can take more material out of the waste stream and utilize it to produce renewable energy, at the same time creating secondary market products like plant food or biochar or electricity that can be utilized to subsidize those costs. One of the big, real expensive parts of moving waste is getting it on trucks and onto the ferry, not to mention the greenhouse gas emissions from those trucks, moving them across the ferry and into a landfill. So those are 2 areas I'm really keen on looking into how we can actually implement now. Recently, Washington State University received a grant to look exactly at that, and how could we put a system here to sort of prove that out with food waste, primarily within the restaurant business and hospitality business here on San Juan Island, and expanding that further. So that would be a really good first start, I think.
Okay, now we have the same question for Cindy. Would you like Linnea to repeat the question?
Sure. Oh, I think I've got it. So as far as reducing waste stream and educating people on the islands, one of the things that I've heard a lot of talk about, and I love the ideas that come from our community, is a glass crusher. And a glass crusher would significantly reduce the weight of the waste that we are trying to move off the islands. And we would be able to reuse that glass or the sand, what you want to call it, glass powder, here on the islands for various construction projects. I think reuse is a huge part of education. I think that living on an island, I've never lived on an island before, and in the 10 years that I've lived here, I have found that I think more in terms of, do I really need to replace something immediately? Is it better to fix it? And in educating people that what you bring here is eventually going to have to leave unless you can find a reuse for it, I think is a big piece of that kind of education.
Okay, thank you. Now we have Christine.
I'm really sorry. My internet just booted me. All of a sudden the screen froze and I was the only one animated, and I think it is my internet. And if it happens again, please don't let it happen again. I'll come right back.
Okay, do you want Linnea to repeat the question? I don't know if you heard it.
I did not hear the question.
What will you do if you are elected to reduce the amount of waste we send to landfills and educate the community?
I believe that that we have a really much greater opportunity on San Juan Island than we currently have to establish a facility, much like Lopez or Orcas, where they have a great opportunity to utilize all of the reuse, the reduce, reuse, recycle, remake. And I think that the more we do that as a county, as individuals, as businesses, the less we send off to places that we don't really want it to go.
Okay, now we have Rick.
Hi, and just for the record, my name is Rick Hughes, proud Spring Street parent of Ricky Hughes. He'll probably smack me for saying this, and I tried to beg him to come, but he said, no, Dad, I don't do that class. So just real quick, I'd also like to make a Coast Salish acknowledgement. Let us acknowledge we reside on the ancestral lands and waters of the Coast Salish people who have taken care of these islands since time immemorial. So sorry about that. I just wanted to get that in because it's important for us to talk about that. San Juan County is a really amazing place, and we're a bunch of islands, and we have many different solutions for solid waste removal. The county has been supported and backed a zero waste goal, and I fully 100% support that. Cindy brought up a really great point, the glass crusher. We had one in Orcas. We're now currently working with the exchange on Orcas to purchase one in the next billing cycle, which would, and they already have the business next door who will take the sand and the inert material and use it in road construction. So I think that's a really great thing. We're also working with ORS to have a box crusher, which will take cardboard and will allow us to palletize and monetize the cardboard that's there. And I'm only talking about Orcas because Lopez is like 100 light years ahead of us. They have 27 or 37 or whatever the amount is of source separated plastic. They have their own box crusher. They worked with Ecology that the county supported to use the glass to get crushed with basically a bulldozer in one of the old gravel pits, so that it just sort of fills the gravel pit and helps Ecology. So education is really just talking about all of our programs, which we've done a really good job, I think, in the county. And the biggest thing we need to do going forward is to figure out a way to do on a mass scale of food-based composting. But you know, what I think what it really comes down to is each and every one of us. I think it's amazing that you brought this question up, but in order for us to get to a zero waste platform, each person needs to do their part at home. It means washing out your recycling materials. It means turning a light off. It means, do I need to really buy that? Instead of buying a plastic bottle, I can do without that. And I think that's what we need to look at too, is getting rid of single-use plastic, including water bottles. And that's something I will support at the state level, as I have before, or at least tax them, as well as single-use plastic in San Juan County.
Thank you, Rick. Our time is up. And now, Elian, would you like to introduce the next question?
Yes, now we would like to invite Isla to ask Cindy about climate change.
All right, what are your ideas for promoting countywide action to climate change?
Okay. The purview of the county council is the health and safety of its citizens. I think that climate change is a very large part of that. I think it needs to be addressed by partnership with our energy utility in terms of making sure that we are buying energy that is produced in a way that is not producing CO2 emissions. That's going to be addressed on a statewide level by 2030 as well. We do have a mandate. One of the things that I am working on personally here in the San Juans is exploring the idea of kelp farming. And kelp farming is a technology that is the single most efficient technology available to us right now for carbon sequestration. It's something that we very possibly have a number of different places we can engage in doing that. And it is also a deacidification technology. And you can eat it. So it's a really good win-win situation, and it's also a job producer. It also provides home for forests or for foraging fish. So sea kelp forests are good for the herring. And that's something that will address the overall health of the fisheries. So that electric vehicles, putting in infrastructure so that our tourists don't necessarily have to bring their own cars. They can rent electric vehicles here. Biochar production rather than just simply burning all of our waste, our green waste in open quarries. There's really a lot we can do on our little county level to be responsible citizens and take a lead in living a lifestyle that does not exacerbate climate change and hopefully actually makes some progress towards mitigating.
Yep. Thank you, Cindy. Now the same question goes to Christine. Would you like Isla to repeat the question again?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, yes.
Thank you. I think that as humans, and equally as important, a community, we have the opportunity to maximize our efforts and minimize our impacts. I think that we can move towards a more renewable energy in transportation by investing as a county in electric vehicles. I think that investing obviously in the infrastructure required for the charging of electric vehicles is also very important and would serve the greater community. We can find ways within the building codes that currently exist to begin promoting more energy efficient ways of heating, which could be significant for the for cutting the emissions from the future of our housing. And I believe that we really need to, at the end of the day, participate in educating the public about how we as a county and you as individuals can contribute to climate resiliency.
Yes, thank you, Christine. Now the question goes to Rick.
Great, thank you. So I think as we go through some of these answers, you're going to see some layers that come back and forth because I think it's really important. And the first thing, again, on climate change starts with each and every one of us. And I think all of us in this community can be climate warriors. And it starts by turning off the electricity, turning off a light, really being careful of what you purchase and how you use that product, having your own composting, growing your own local vegetables. So I think each and every one of us can play a really important part of that. Again, we just talked about the zero waste. That's one of the components. There isn't a silver bullet for climate change. It's really a layering of different activities and behavioral changes that we need to make as a community and as a country to really make an impact. I think we've seen this in just the COVID time, how greener our planet has gotten just like that when we start reducing things. So a lot of the things that I'm interested in doing, the county's working on a process of rolling out 1 megawatt of solar power on county buildings. We just passed a climate change resolution a few months ago. Personally, we have put 7.9 kilowatts of solar power on our roof, and a building we're involved with was just installed over the East Sound Green with 7.5 kilowatts. We're doing our part locally to reduce our footprint. I have lobbied in Olympia and have worked with Maria Cantwell on long-term hybrid solutions for our transportation infrastructure, including mass transit and ferries. I have fully supported and endorsed hybridization of our ferry system. I am actively representing on the Joint Transportation Commission, all of local government pushing for a carbon fee and carbon mitigation for the long run. I'm also supporting looking at everything we do on the land use side through a climate change prism, which will really affect every aspect of how we do of how we work and operate in our community. And I think we need to find responsible ways to generate renewable energy without having a huge impact on our existing. And then we need to finally get rid of packaging. So there was another bill.
That's 2 minutes. Thank you, Rick. And lastly, we go to Ryan.
Thank you for this question. I just want to acknowledge that climate change is the existential threat of our time. And we have to do everything that we can. First, by listening to you, listening to the students who put on their climate strike. I was with you in that march, and it was amazing. It was fantastic, and we all heard you. Shortly after, a resolution was passed by county council to push forward targets for climate change and what the county can do. I would take that a step further and actually make that an ordinance, and hold my own feet to the fire to make sure that everything that I say I want to do, that I do. And that's going to be really critical going forward, is keeping track and targets of these pieces of data. It is a lot of data to look at, and having a place where we can all look and see, like, oh, look, we've done so many megawatts of power, we've done so much renewable, we've done so much waste reduction. And it's really a full convergence of all these different areas that's really going to help us get over this dependence on fossil fuels. Shortly after the climate strike, I helped form Fossil Free by 33 on Lopez Island, which is a target to have a fossil-free Lopez by 2033. The more research I've done, the more realistic this is starting to look, especially with the electrification of transportation. I'm also the president of the San Juan Islands Electric Vehicle Association. And in 4 years in that role, we've gone from 55 electric vehicles registered in the county to 437, which is a 676% increase in just 4 years. So when we really get behind something as a community, we can really make a big impact. And I'd like to thank you guys for really kicking that off in all of our hearts and minds. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Ryan. And Ella?
Our next question goes to Christine, and we have environmental systems student Wesley Rich asking about affordable housing.
Okay. All right, Christine, what is your position when it comes to affordable and sustainable housing? And how does your plan differ from the other candidates?
I almost forgot to unmute myself. My position on affordable and sustainable housing is that it's a very critical need in the county. The second part of your question sort of fuzzed out, and I do believe you asked, how does that differ from my candidates?
Yeah. How does it differ from the other candidates?
I don't think it differs in any way. I think that there's no, dissolution in anybody's minds at this point that there is a severe lack of affordable and sustainable housing, whether it's home ownership or renting. I think that we're all on the same page there. I think that as a county, we need to get real creative, very flexible, potentially, look beyond non-traditional housing to maximize, opportunity, because at the end of the day, not everybody needs to live in a big house or even a medium-sized house. I think there's a lot of opportunities for folks that could be very happy in something that is very modest. And in that regard, I think that the county needs to take a really hard look at land use planning and address barriers that exist currently for those opportunities.
Thank you. And now we have the same question for Rick.
Great, thank you very much.
Rick, you are muted.
This is weird. I mute it and then unmute and then I mute and then it, anyway. So regarding guest house, I think we all, regarding affordable housing, I think we all have very similar understanding of the need and the desire to provide accessible housing for people in our community. I think that, the existing organizations that are doing affordable housing in this community have done a really good job, specifically at sort of the lower end of the wage scale. Where we seem to have a problem is really in a household income range of $35,000 to about $80,000, which are a lot of folks that are first responders and teachers and work for the county. And it's really hard because they can't get into, like, for example, an Opal house on Orcas because they make too much money, but it's hard for them to secure a loan. And so that's where I think our sweet spot is, to provide access, because we need working families in this community. And the county's done, thanks to a lot of people in the community, and I think Brian was involved at some level as well in passing the affordable housing REIT, which is, we're the only county in the state that has that 0.5 REIT, and a REIT is a real estate excise tax. So basically people who are coming to live in our community, they're buying in to our community by a 1% tax that goes to the land bank to preserve land, and a 0.5% tax that goes for building housing. We've council worked with the housing group to come up with different options. So it doesn't have to just be Opal or Homes for Islanders, that a nonprofit or a for-profit business, as long as they're building affordable housing, can come in. Last week or a week and a half ago, we authorized $1.7 million in grants for actually housing construction. And I think we're going to add hopefully another $300,000 in the next week or so for a project to complete on Lopez. So I think we have a really good plan. We need to look, the problem we have when it comes to land use is that we're sort of kind of stuck in between the Growth Management Act. And I've been working in Olympia to try to modify local control and local sovereignty in regards to the Growth Management Act, because it's really something that was built for Issaquah and then placed on us. And so we need to figure out the right places where we can expand access to housing. I also think we need to look at tiny homes and guest houses and alter the energy code so that if you're in a 400 square foot tiny home, you don't have to meet the standards, because there's a lot of barriers, cost barriers, maybe utilities or energy standards that make a small house hard to build affordably.
Okay, thank you. Now we have Ryan.
Thank you. This is a really great question. It's a critical concern for many people in San Juan County. And originally what brought me out here actually was working with a group called the Eco Builders Guild out of Seattle and Olympia, who kept telling me, Ryan, you're doing all this stuff with green building. Have you been out to the San Juans yet? And I'm like, no, why? And it's because of the building codes that we have here and the rainwater catchment that we have here. And it's an extremely critical and unique place due to our needs and logistical difficulties to actually kind of bend the rules a little bit for everywhere else. So I'm really excited to see what we can do with affordable housing. One of the big areas for concern on affordable housing, though, is how do you build these? Are we just doing cheap construction and cheap energy systems, or are we building these to be permanently affordable? Permanent affordability would be, okay, I have a house and it costs me $500-600 a month in mortgage. But then if you have a really inefficient home, you might have a $500 or $600 energy bill. So that bumps it right out of affordability and into non-affordability. So making sure that things are permanently affordable are going to be very important. Moving into the future, making sure that houses that are purchasable now can continue to be affordable in future. And that's one big concern we're seeing with some affordable houses, is that they'll be affordable for the first or second family to live in them, but by the third or fourth family that comes in and moves into that house, it might be much more expensive. So that's a concern. But then also we can't just have unlimited growth either. We have to keep the rural designations of our county and our natural environment pristine as well. It's one of the reasons why we all chose to live here. So it's a very critical and complex issue, but one that, like Rick said, I helped with the real estate excise tax for homes 2 years ago. So it's something that I think we have a lot of way to go, but we have a good plan in place to make sure that happens.
Okay, last but not least, we have Cindy.
Hi. Okay, this is a very exciting question for me. I think this is really a crucial piece of keeping our communities integrated and put together and healthy for the long term. We need places. I've seen too many teachers, for instance, come in to Orcas Island with the thought that they're going to be able to find a place to live, and then finding that they cannot afford to buy a house here, nor is there a year-round rental available for them. So I think there's a lot of different approaches we can take to making affordable housing available. I think one is capping vacation rentals and decoupling vacation rental permits from the deed so they don't convey with the houses, so that we disincentivize real estate investments in that manner, and hopefully get a few more houses back onto the year-round rental market. I think as far as developing environmentally responsible affordable housing, one of the really great ideas I've seen is cluster housing in rural areas. So when you're in a rural area, you don't necessarily want to encourage sprawl. You want people to come here because they're coming here for the lifestyle. They're obviously not coming here to get rich. So if you can get them into a place where you've got the elements of what makes a house expensive under control, you can cluster them together, but you can get them next to, say, a piece of land bank land or a farm where if they are young farmers, they will have access to publicly owned rural land. I think that's a really interesting way to go and a really interesting way to think about it.
Thank you. Now Elian will introduce the next question.
Our third question goes to Rick, and we'll have August Grininger asking about whales and salmon.
Hello, everybody. My question is, what regulations are you willing to put into place to protect our salmon and whales population?
First thing I'd really like to do is to work British Columbia through the Port of Vancouver came up with a speed test where they required all of the large shipping boats that come through Harrow Strait to slow down to 11 knots. I would love to see San Juan County have the same. So San Juan County is basically like a roundabout for all the natural resource shipments. So anything coming out of Vancouver or Seattle or Tacoma comes through San Juan County's waters. So I would like to have a required slowdown speed for all the big all the big container ships. They registered about a 36% reduction in noise by the voluntary slowdown. I also would like to have a permitted whale watching fee that we could use to raise enough money for a natural resource officer that San Juan County would have, and it would allow us to. Right now, San Juan County is really only allowed to be out in the water when they're doing Homeland Security grant work. So if we had a way to create a natural resource officer, they could be out and patrolling all the whale watching boats. I think we should look at a separation of space between the whale watching, even a little bit further than the governor's task force brought forward. And I think we need to look at areas where we would limit fishing for certain parts of the year. On salmon habitat, San Juan County is a really interesting place because we have very limited stream access for spawning. So we become nearshore habitat for salmon coming in and out. I have been a big personal advocate for the Glenwood Springs hatchery on orcas. And we need to continue to support the acquisition of land to preserve land upland of key habitat areas for spawning, and continue to work both on the mainland as well as here in this community for what we call watershed planning. So the state's in the process of being required to replace all the culverts, but you replace one culvert and cities or counties have culverts on either side and it doesn't do any work. So we really need to focus our energy tactically and our resources to work on preservation up and down the I-5 corridor and all the span.
And that's 2 minutes. Thank you, Rick. And the same question goes to Cindy.
Hi, and this will be my final question because I have a previous commitment. So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak to you today. I'd like to add to the ideas and priorities that Rick had that we need to make sure that our oil spill response infrastructure is in good shape. We need to place a special emphasis on reaching our goals for stormwater treatment. I think we need to tighten up a little bit on our septic requirements and making sure that they are the inspections are being done and that the minimum requirements are being met. I think that we need to look at stream flow. And we need to talk about eelgrass protection and feeder fish and fry habitat.
So unfortunately, Cindy has to leave us, but on behalf of the Environmental Systems class and the Eco Club, I'd like to thank you for participating in our forum.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So now the same question goes to Ryan.
This is another expansive issue that touches on climate change. It touches on natural protections. One thing I'd like to tell a little story about how I've been doing my part on this. Friday Harbor Labs has actually been conducting a 3-year study on eelgrass wasting disease. And they actually reached out to me knowing that I was a UAV licensed operator, a drone operator. And we've actually put that technology in place to do mapping of eelgrass beds around all of our really critical areas. And it allows us to take a 3D topographical map. And that map, what it does is it shows year over year the growth or decrease in eelgrass wasting disease affected areas. Now, eelgrass is very, very critical because it is herring spawn. And that is where herring lay their eggs and new herring are born. And those herring are so important because salmon feed on those herring. And those salmon are so important because the whales feed on the salmon. So little tiny, tiny parts of what, if you were just walking along and didn't really pay super close attention, is actually extremely critical to the greater life cycle. So all these tiny, tiny pieces can play a huge role in the macrocosm that is the Salish Sea. I would want to work more closely with the Marine Resources Committee, Plastic Free Salish Sea, and I would want to see what the experts actually would recommend, what they think would be the best options for us to protect our salmon, protect our whales, and protect our waters. And that's exactly the first step I would take.
Yes, thank you, Ryan. And now we will have Christine.
Okay. As a county, I actually think that we have been reasonably progressive, starting with creating the MRC, the Marine Resources Committee, which, was probably 15 years ago at this point, which is a voluntary citizen advisory group that does, in fact, relay to council in the giving council the ability to make appropriate decisions for the environment. It advises, it participates in local and regional processes that do the work to figure out how to help affected marine animals. We also have designated the marine stewardship area. That was in 2004. And at this point, I think some of the top threats affecting the marine diversity that we really need to focus on. The primary one, no doubt, based on everything that is out and available for anybody to understand, is to protect our area from large oil spills. That will be one of the most critical areas of protection in the near future. I think that we need to focus on climate change because that in and of itself is creating much of what we see as the problem in terms of, degradation of our environment. And I also think that we need to look to the sort of outlying sources of degradation of the salmon population, which means outside of our county.
Yes, thank you. Now, Ella.
Okay, the fourth question will go to Ryan, and Linnea is asking about tourism.
How do you plan to balance our tourist economy with environmental protection?
This is a very critical component of COVID recovery and how we're going to see our economy recover after this devastating pandemic has shaken the world. A lot of areas with tourism is really the major focus is finding balance between how many tourists we allow to come in, which we can't 100% control, and allowing how much movement we can actually have around the county as being a local. So finding that balance between inviting tourism and thereby economy with safety and making sure that everyone that does come here it does so in a safe way. However, we also want to use tourism dollars to mitigate climate impact. Each visitor that comes here is responsible for a certain amount of CO2, a certain amount of use of the environment, a certain amount of water use. We want to make sure that when people do come here, they are aware of this fact, and their being here benefits us. And I think they do in a lot of ways already, but can also be expanded in the future to say, like, okay, we don't want to have you guys bring all of your gas vehicles here. We have awesome electric vehicles here that you could rent or use, or maybe even public transportation options. Orcas High School and Lopez School are both getting electric school buses at the end of this year. It's a super exciting method. So people can come here for ecological tourism, as well as, it's very, very pretty, but also to see how things can be done right and how their being here can benefit all of us that live here.
Okay, thank you. Now we have Christine.
I find that at this point, COVID really does have an opportunity for us to examine the way that we were addressing tourism previously and the way we can address it moving into the future. I do believe that there really does need to be a balance between that which we promote and that which we protect. And the greatest opportunity that we have is to educate the tourists that would be coming the minute they get on that boat through the islands in different interpretation throughout the islands at different places where we can provide interpretations of how to care for the environment and really facilitate the conversation about how we can make this place last as long as we can imagine for everybody.
Thank you. Finally, Rick.
Great, thank you. And first of all, I didn't get an opportunity again to say this. I really want to thank each and every one of you students for putting this on. I think it's really important that you're here asking the questions of your leaders. And I think it's really important going forward in all of these questions that your engagement at this level in your lives, that you start with this passion and you grow, because we're only going to change because of kids like you, or young adults like you, excuse me. So tourism is an interesting thing. I think, my family's been on this island. I think Ricky's 6th generation on Orcas on my wife's side. So, our family's been here for a long time. Tourism is been here, is here, and will be here for a long time. And I think we need to be really careful about saying who we allow or what kind of things we allow to do, because I've had an amazing life experience in sitting around a fire with my uncle and my dad when I was a kid. That's not a bad experience. Fishing isn't a bad experience either. But I think tourism, we will not see tourism levels like we had in 2018 ever again. Our ferry system is in huge trouble right now. I think we're down 36 or 37%. And I think we will still see people here, but the biggest issue we need to deal with is, of the 40 some odd % of our housing stock that isn't used full time, if those people move here, we're going to see an immediate increase in the impact in our community. And that's good economically because it spreads out, potentially makes us a year-round economy. I think we as individuals need to shop locally. I think, Linnea's Family Island Time is a great example. Like, we need to invest in small scale manufacturing that builds big brands that you don't have to come to San Juan County to experience San Juan County. You can have oysters that are from Judd Cove, or you can have, one of the amazing products that Linnea's family does, and you can have that feeling and feel like you're there without being there. And I think that is really how we have to look at diversification of our economy. And I really think the LTE wireless and fiber to the home that Rock Island and Opalco has put in has been transformational for our community. I mean, can you guys imagine without Netflix if we didn't have, Rock Island? So I think we're going to see the next generation of who we are as a community. And it'll be less tourism based, but we'll still face similar issues about number of people and natural resource development and climate change. And we just have to look at it through a different scope. So thank you very much for the question.
You're welcome. Elliot?
So our last question goes to Christine, and Wesley is going to ask about economy.
All right. Okay, Christine, due to COVID-19, how are you planning to help local businesses bounce back?
I am a local business, actually. And so I think that I have a sort of a bird's eye view of what I would need in the ability for me to bounce back. Now, I don't think that I have, although it has been incredibly impactful, don't get me wrong, I think that our locals have done a really fantastic job of creating a situation where they are shopping locally, they are supporting locally, and they are giving out of the goodness of every bit of their hearts. And I do think that as a county, I would be supportive of utilizing CARES Act funding, which is in fact happening, to provide small grants to local businesses to allow them to do what it takes any given moment, whether that's paying the rent or buying more supplies or PPEs for that matter. The county has created a situation where they have been very communicative and very informative of what has happened from the beginning. That has been very helpful for me, and I would continue that moving forward. I think that the county has been good, and I would love to continue in that same manner.
Yes, thank you, Christine. Next, we will ask Rick.
Yes, thank you for the question. And just for the record, our family operates 2 small businesses in Orcas. We run Ray's Pharmacy and Khan's Pit Stop. We have been fortunate to be open every day since COVID started. And so I definitely understand the perils involved. We have 26 employees and paying insurance and paying payroll. And I think the federal government has done a fairly good job, as well as the state, in providing access to small business. The county's currently rolling out a $157,000 small business grant to help businesses who haven't been able to get some of the federal and state assistance. We need to continue that. We've also given, I think, $200,000 to our family resource centers to provide emergency rental assistance. So that helps the employees that are working in the small businesses, or helps the small business owners themselves. We've also provided, I think, close to $100,000 to the EDC so that they can help guide business owners through the process and provide assistance and information. The interesting thing about the county is we talk a lot about wanting to help create jobs, but it's not really our direct business. We help find money, and then we funnel the money through other organizations that can help assist independent business owners and people in the community. But we need to continue to work on what that next option is. I'd like to see more money that the county spends to be spent locally, may it be road construction projects, office supplies. And I think we need to continue to invest in the EDC. We need to work on programs that do and support the trades. It's almost impossible to find a plumber or an electrician right now. And I think we will see a large bit of new home construction and remodeling over the next couple of years, and we need to be able to support people like that. And I think, there's little forums that have grown up, like an Orcas, it's a brick and mortar group. I think people just need to communicate more and work together, and then ask the county for help, and we'll listen. And if we don't have an answer, we'll try to figure out one for you.
Yes, thank you. To conclude, we will have Ryan to answer that question.
I think one thing that the pandemic has taught us is that we've grown too reliant on focusing our economy heavily on a 2 to 3 month period every year. That makes our economy very, very liable to disruption if something like a global pandemic could completely stop. To counter that, what I would suggest and what I would work towards is to diversify and make our economy more year-round. Actually, in this process of running for county council, I've actually gone to a bunch of different business owners, many different business owners, and said, wouldn't it be great if you didn't have to have all of your business all at this one time and have it more spread out throughout the year? And they have all agreed. They've all said that, yes, absolutely. If we could keep business steady as opposed to a huge spike and then a sudden decrease in business, that would be fantastic. And ways we can do that is, one, by promoting more renewable energy, 2, promoting more local distribution of foods and goods and services. I've worked a lot with the San Juan Islands Food Hub and looking at ways we could have our local producers and growers and makers distribute their goods and services throughout the county at a greater scale. And it's been extremely successful so far. It's really been spurred on by food supply worries due to COVID. So I think looking towards the future, we want to look at something of a longer, more year-round based economy that will help with jobs, that will help with local businesses, and will help the county as a whole have a steady, even number of folks here, especially looking at shoulder seasons and even off-season tourism and visitation. So that's something I really would like to see in the future.
Yes, thank you, Ryan.
So it seems we have ended a little bit early, but I wanted to ask if any of the other panelists have other questions that they would like to ask. Okay, well, Elliot, I'll give it to you to conclude.
On behalf of the environmental system class, I would like to thank all the candidates for participating and giving youth a voice in the process. And we would like to congratulate all the students who took the initiative to plan this. We would also like to thank Katie from Friends of the San Juans as well for the support and help that she put into organization of this forum. And finally, thank you to all the community members that attended to our youth-led forum.
Yeah, Rick, do you have something to say?
Yeah, I just want to say something, and I'd like to speak for all four of us. And if I'm wrong, please correct me, any one of you. But I think a bunch of you are 18 or pretty close, and I just want to make sure that you all vote. It doesn't matter who you vote for. It is one of the biggest responsibilities that we as citizens have, and it's a right that people fight for. And see, he's right there with me. And I just think this could be the most important election that we see in our lifetime. And so I just encourage you to tell your friends, and it is just a huge responsibility. So please vote. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Rick.
I got you.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, well, sign off. Thank you, everybody. Have a good rest of the afternoon.
Yes.